Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We've got very big breaking news tonight. On the eve of the House vote to send President Donald Trump's articles of impeachment over to the Senate, the House Intelligence Committee, that would be, of course, the committee that held the impeachment inquiry, that interviewed the witnesses, that committee just released an incredibly incriminating cache of documents from Rudy Giuliani's indicted associate, Lev Parnas. And we told you yesterday that those documents were transmitted over to the House. And tonight, just in the past couple hours, really, we got a small group of them. And we've been going through them and digesting just how explosive and wild the stuff in there is. They include the following: handwritten notes from Lev Parnas on a Ritz-Carlton hotel notepad from Vienna, the first of which reads, I'm not making this up, "Get Zelensky to announce that the Biden case will be investigated." Those are presumably directions he got from someone, or his agenda was remarkably similar to the president's stated agenda. The documents include an absolute crazy, and I mean just crazy, text conversation between Lev Parnas and a new character, a guy who we did not know before tonight, named Robert Hyde. We think he appears to be running for Congress in Connecticut's 5th District. And these text conversations, again, if they're to be read correctly, are absolutely chilling. They basically have a conversation about the security of the then U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch. And the texts appear to suggest that Robert Hyde, a guy who is running for Congress in Connecticut, who's a big Trump supporter, who's been photographed with the president multiple times, that Hyde was tracking every movement of the ambassador. I'm going to quote a few of them here. "She's talked to 3 people. Her phone is off. Computer is off." How does he know that? "She's next to the embassy. If you want her out, they need to make contact with security forces." We're going to have a lot more of those texts on that particular topic because it's really almost unbelievable. The text and the documents also includes an email from the president's current lawyer, Jay Sekulow, who's set to be representing the president in the well of the Senate, to the president's old lawyer, John Dowd, telling him explicitly, quote, "The president consents to allowing your representation of Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman." If all the photos of Lev Parnas and Donald Trump side by side were not enough proof for you, this email basically shows the president knows exactly who Lev Parnas is, and he knew that his former lawyer was going to represent him. Those are just the highlights. But in order to sort of understand what these documents show, and we're still making sense of them, we just got them, we don't have the full context for all of them, so we're sort of piecing together. But you got to remember, again, who Lev Parnas is. He's one of the 2 guys who were arrested in October on the way to Vienna, just hours after they ate lunch with Rudy Giuliani at Trump's D.C. hotel. Parnas and his associate Igor Fruman were charged with working to get the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, removed, partly through illegal campaign donations. Their lawyer, who was Trump's lawyer, John Dowd, actually said that they were part of Trump's legal team in a letter to Congress. Like Giuliani and Parnas and Fruman, and they were all part of the team. That's what he told Congress. And then when the congressional impeachment investigation was heating up, Donald Trump went out on the White House lawn and denied knowing them at all.
What conversations have you had with Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman?
I don't know those gentlemen.
You're in pictures
now,
with
it's
them.
possible I have a picture with them because I have a picture with everybody. I don't know them. I don't know about them. I don't know what they do. But I don't know. Maybe they were clients of Rudy. You'd have to ask Rudy. I just don't know.
Remember, we just reported on an email, the president's personal attorney telling their attorney that it was okay to represent them as directed by the president. It was reported that that moment outside the White House, that denial, that was the moment that Lev Parnas turned on Trump. And it was the moment he started wanting to cooperate with the House impeachment inquiry. And for the past few days, in fact, for the past few weeks, even months, there's been a kind of drip, drip, drip from Parnas's new non-Trump lawyer promising to deliver thousands of pages of documents to Congress. What we got today, just in the last few hours again, was 38 of those pages. And the document dump comes against the backdrop of an impending Senate impeachment trial set to start on Tuesday, with an unanswered question about what that trial is going to look like. And crucially, are we going to hear from witnesses, and are we going to see documents that the Senate Democrats are seeking? Every time, every single time throughout the saga that we get more evidence, things look worse for the president. Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.